So you're going to be on.
Hey, well, thank you everyone so much for joining. It's great to see everyone virtually. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and we'll get started.
Well, I'm moving out of the way.
We don't have a video.
Oops, sorry. Okay, so my name is Sarah Claussen. For those who don't know me, I'm a graduate assistant at UTHealth School of Public Health, and I've been working with an amazing group of people this past year and a half, which is comprised of students, faculty, and staff. And this year we put a virtual series called UTHealth Votes for this upcoming election, and this is the last webinar of that series. This is about candidates and issues and informed voting. And this is our agenda for today. I'm going to talk a little bit longer. Two of our speakers are with the League of Women Voters, so I'll share a little bit of information about them in case you don't know about that agency. And then we'll also have time for Q&A after each presenter talks about what's on the ballot for their county. So we have Harris County and Fort Bend County today. Let me just move this around. And for those of you who don't know League of Women Voters, they've been around for 100 years, so I can't do it justice, but it did start 100 years ago with the right to vote for women. Obviously, not everyone had the right to vote yet then. So since its beginning, it's fought and worked hard to expand voting rights for people that were excluded from the process. And other initiatives, as we can see, they also do voter education. So obviously it's important to exercise a right to vote, but also making informed decisions when we're at the voting poll. So today, again, will be about their voter guides, and they are the experts. So I'm going to let them go into the issues and positions. And before they talk about the voter guides, we also wanted to briefly just go over an action plan. Going out and vote sounds really easy, but it's really important to have that each of us has a plan, and then we share that with others so that way it guarantees that we are voting. So first, obviously, is checking your registration status. The last day to register to vote was yesterday. We had series over that. Even if you know you're registered, it's really important to just double check in case you moved within your county. Secondly, scheduling that day. I know I live by my calendar, so scheduling a day on your calendar to vote. Early voting does start on the 13th and ends on the 30th, and obviously election day is November 3rd. Personalizing your ballot. This is a really great link, and if Dr. Wells, if you don't mind posting it on the chat. Vote 411, you can put in your address, and then it will generate a personalized ballot for you, and then you pick. You make your decisions that way and print it. If you don't have a printer like me, I usually write it out on a paper, since when you go to the voting poll, you can't have your phone out. I've made that mistake before. So you have to have a print or physical copy of your selections. And then before you vote, making sure that you have an acceptable voter ID. There's also a link here. Dr. Wells, if you also don't mind sharing that. It's a great link that shows what forms are acceptable. And this might be, no news for people, but I've had to share it with quite a few friends or family members who moved recently, and they're trying to figure out what ID is acceptable. And lastly, just really encouraging your friends and family to also make a voting plan, putting it in the calendar. Especially with COVID, it's really great to take advantage of early voting when it's less crowded, and you don't have to worry about it the day of. And also using social media, if you do use social media, to encourage friends that way too. And I'm going to move this on to Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield with League of Women Voters, and she's going to go over the voter's guide for Harris County. And Annie, do you want me to stop? I can stop sharing. That way you can share your screen.
Okay.
Okay, and then you can go ahead and share yours.
It's such an incredible amount of information in terms of streaming this. So am I sharing? Oh, did I screw it up?
No, yeah, I don't see it yet.
It didn't come up. You know,
Ms. Benefield, do you have more than one monitor?
no,
No.
weird. I mean, it always works before. So if you could go ahead and let Leola go, then you can come back to me to see if I get this to work. I mean, I've never had a problem before, so I don't understand what's happening now.
Right. Not a problem. Okay, Leola. So Leola Gross. I'm going to share my screen again.
Okay.
So thank you for joining us. She's with the League of Women Voters chapter with Fort Bend County, and they have a big election as well with local positions. So Leola Ross, if you don't mind taking it away from here.
Not at all. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining on this very important information webinar. As Sarah said, I'm with the chapter of in Fort Bend County for the League of Women Voters. We formed a chapter in Fort Bend County about 2.5 years ago. So on your ballot this November, you're going to find a long list of candidates' races to vote in. And I want to stress to everyone that it's really important to go all the way down your ballot and vote for each race, if at all possible. You don't have to vote in each race, but each one is very important. And so at the very top of the guide or of your ballot, obviously, is going to be the president and vice president, your U.S. senator, and several races that are federal races and statewide races. I always advise people to first find their sample ballot, and I've included a link here on the slide. Fort Bend County, and if you use the search term fortbendvotes.org, it'll take you to the Fort Bend County government website, and you can click on the link to print your sample ballot. And you just need to know which precinct you live in. And then you can view all the races that will be on your ballot. So that's a good first step to be able to view your ballot ahead of time. And then you'll be prepared when you go in to the voting booth. The voter's guide on vote411.org will cover the candidates, but it does not cover the propositions that are going to be on your ballot. In Fort Bend County, you're going to have all residents in the county will have 8 races that are county-wide races, and then 2 propositions to vote on. And that will be in addition to a county constable for your precinct, there will also be voted for your congressional representative for CD 22, and you'll be voting for a Texas State House representative according to the district you live in, and you'll be voting for a Texas State Senator according to the district that you live in. All right. So keep going down your ballot, and you will find the county-wide races. And as I said, there are 8 races that all residents in the county will vote for. And Those races start with your district court judges. You'll be voting for 4 different judges for the district courts in Fort Bend County. District courts are really, really important courts because they are the highest trial court for the state in our county. They can specialize in different types of cases. So 2 of the 4 district courts are family law courts, and 2 of the district courts cover criminal and civil cases. So, for example, if you or a loved one happened to be in a situation where you're going to court for an issue that involves a child custody dispute or a child support case, you would be hearing your case, your case would be presented in the district court that specializes in family law. And if you are a family member or a friend was involved in a breach of contract that was involved an amount over $200, again, that case would be heard in a district court in one of the courts that specializes in civil cases and criminal law cases. So what we do is we craft questions to ask these candidates. We try to have them present their qualifications and why they are very well qualified to serve in their position. And we ask some specific questions that we hope will inform you in making your decision. For each of these district courts, there are 2 candidates, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, so that you'll find that on your ballot. Another countywide race that all residents will vote on is the county court at law. There's 1 county court at law that is being voted on this November. And these are county level trial courts, and they cover all different types of cases. So again, the qualifications of and the experience of the candidates, you can read about that by looking at the questions and their answers. There is 1 Republican and 1 Democrat running for that office. Countywide races, again, you have a county attorney to put on, county sheriff, county tax assessor collector. And if you're not sure what exactly these offices, what the duties and responsibilities are for each of these offices, a description is included on the voter's guide of Vote 411. And then you can read the candidates' responses to our questions. All Fort Bend County residents will be voting on 2 propositions. And these propositions, Proposition A and Proposition B, we do not cover these in the voter's guide, but if you look at your sample ballot, you will see that it's on your sample ballot. And you're essentially just going to be voting for or against issuing bonds. One Proposition A is for issuing bonds to construct, maintain, and operate county roads. And Proposition B is to vote for or against issuing bonds for county park facilities. So that is just a way that you can ensure that or express your support or not for spending money, for the county to spend money on those issues. Keep going down your ballot, and you will find on your ballot, according to the precinct you live in, either 1, 2, 3, or 4, some additional races that you'll need to vote on. In precinct 1, you will vote for a county commissioner, and there is a Republican, Vincent Morales, and a Democrat, Jennifer Cantu, who's running for that position. The county commissioners are very important positions. They represent your county precinct, and they serve on the county Commissioners Court, which is the governing body for the county. So your commissioner is making decisions that impact you with regard to budgets, tax rates, and some of the fees that are charged in the county. They oversee all of the non-elected departments in the county. And some examples of those departments would be like the county libraries, the parks and recreation facilities in the county, the elections administration for the county, and the building and maintenance of roads and bridges. So some of the questions that we have asked the county commissioners to respond to have to do directly with some of these responsibilities. And one of the questions that we've asked them is how about mobility issues, transportation, traffic, that type of thing, as well as flood mitigation, because we felt like those were two very important issues that residents in the county would want to know about. We also asked them a question with relation to elections, because they are involved with budgeting for elections, for running elections. So we asked them if they would be in favor of funding an intelligent ballot tracking system. Harris County has funded that, and it's been working very well for their voters this time, I believe, from what I've read. And it would be an important issue, I think, for voters to know about. So that's commissioner. And again, Precinct 1 residents, you will be voting on your commissioner. You'll be voting for a justice of the peace and a constable. And each of those positions has a Democrat and a Republican running for the office. Precinct 2 residents, you only have a constable to vote on, and he is running unopposed. So your ballot will be slightly shorter. Precinct 3, you also have a county commissioner to vote on, and there is the Republican W.A. Andy Myers and Democrat Hope Martin running for that position. And you will be voting or choosing between Republican Chad Norville and Democrat Patrick Quincy for your county constable. Precinct 4 residents, you'll be voting on your county constable. And that's the Republican John G. Herman and the Democrat Nabil Shaikh. Okay, so those are county races to vote on. We also covered city elections for 5 of the larger cities in the county. And those are the city elections in Missouri City, Richmond, Rosenberg, Sugar Land, and Stafford. So they have mayor, some of the cities have a mayoral election, and a city council election. So, those will be on your ballot. There are other cities, some of the smaller cities and towns, that are also having elections for their city council or mayor. We only covered the larger cities, but again, going back to your sample ballot, you would see those races on your sample ballot. There are several propositions for you to vote on. Different cities have several propositions. And again, that's another reason to be looking at your sample ballot ahead of time, so that you know what they are and have some time to think about whether you want to vote for them or against them. Some of the cities have as many as 8 propositions for you to vote on. So there's a lot to take in. The other area of governance that we cover in our voters guide is the school board elections. We do cover all 6 school districts that are in the county. Not all of them are having elections this time, but the ones that are, you will find on your in your guide and can read about the candidates' responses to our questions. And I'd also just like to take time to emphasize that if you have more questions for these candidates, then by all means, you can reach out to them and ask your questions. They've all put contact information into the voter's guide. Those that did not respond, it's not because it's not because I didn't make several attempts using lots of different ways of contacting them. It's just that they have chosen not to respond. If you want to ask them some questions, then you'll have to find their contact information on your own, unfortunately. But I was very pleased that a large percentage of the candidates did respond. One other item I wanted to also cover is depending on your location in the county, you will also be voting on directors that serve on your municipal utility district, the MUD, if you live in an area that's serviced by a MUD or a LID. So those will also be something that you'll have to vote on and are very important. They'll be down at the bottom of your ballot. But again, please do look at your sample ballot. We have tried to ask some broader questions of our candidates to enable them to identify what their priorities are, but we ask them also to provide some specific ways that they would plan to address their priorities. We hope that we can just hope that they are as specific as we ask them to be. That's not always the case, but they do present some good information to inform you as you're making your decision on who to vote for. Let me just glance through my notes, see if I had anything else. No, I don't think that's. I won't name all the different candidates, but just know that really there are very few uncontested races on your ballot. So lots of important decisions to make. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leola. That was wonderful. I don't live in Fort Bend, but it's fascinating to hear what races y'all have going on right now. Personally brought me to the League of Women Voter Guides was how they're developed. So I appreciate you sharing more information on how those guides are developed, because so much work goes into it, so much collaboration.
Yes.
Especially getting that one-on-one input from the candidates is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I feel like it's a real value of real value to the voters to hear directly from the candidates. We do not edit anything. We just ask that they are required that they comply to our request to be civil. And if they're not, then we do ask them to redo their response in order to comply with that request. But otherwise we do not edit anything.
Oh, wow, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. And if y'all have any questions that are specific to Fort Bend or Harris County, we're going to hold questions and answers after the presentations. So thank you again, Leola.
You're welcome.
Okay. And then hopefully, Dr.
Hopefully
Amy,
we can try this again.
Yes. Okay, so I stopped sharing my screen. try it out, see if it works. Yay!
Yay. Now I'm trying to just find the thing under there because the headings is up there. That's closing it off. Let's see if I could do it. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. You know, the snafus in terms of technology, we're increasingly getting accustomed to it. I've used Google Meet, I've used Google Hangout, I've used WebEx, I've used Zoom. So it's just a countless parade of different technologies in terms of getting accustomed to it. So I try not to get anxious or overly excited when it happens, because inevitably technology is so wonderful when it works, but when you have a snafu, it seems like the time just stops and will not move forward. One of the things that on the Harris County ballot, I was listening to Bob Stein in a seminar about 2 weeks ago, and he was saying Harris County has the longest ballot of any place, literally almost in the country, he says. So there are lots of different things. I strongly recommend that everyone go to their library's website and request that they get the voter's guide. You can get it online. It's in the League of Women Voters Houston produces in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. And you can go in, and as Leola has said so graciously in terms of this information, you can get your sample ballot, but you can't take that in with you unless you can print it out. So if you get a copy of the voter's guide, you can simply take it. You can mark the things that you want to take. And since there is no longer straight ticket voting, it's going to require a little time. So if you've actually completed things in advance, you would be better served in terms of maximizing your time, because you can't go in and press one button and get it all done and walk out. You're going to have to actually go down the ballot in terms of doing that. In Harris County in particular, well, not just in particular, of course, you, as Leola said already, you got the president race, you got a U.S. Senate race that's on everybody's ballot throughout the state, but then the House districts. And out of the Texas House of Representatives, the U.S. congressional delegation, there are 9 congressional districts, one overlap with Leola's in terms of District 22. So you're going to have to make a decision in terms of depending on where you live. So that is critical, as she said. Make sure you go get a sample ballot to see who's on, because just looking in the voter's guide and looking at everybody does not tell you who that specific individual who's running that will represent your interests that's from the particular district that you live in.
Ms. Benefield, I'm sorry, we're just seeing a gray screen. We're not seeing your content. Are you sharing from a website, or are you sharing like a PowerPoint presentation?
I was sharing from a website. I thought I was sharing from a website. Let's just
go. Yes. Did you click on share content or share web browser?
I said share. I thought I said share. It said I'm sharing a web browser, so I'm not sharing content.
No. Any advice from anyone who is more WebEx savvy than me? Okay, now we can see your web.
I will simply just talk.
Now we can see your web browser. If you
now you can see my web browser. Oh,
yeah. God. If you navigate to the tab that is it the Houston voter tab that you're wanting to share?
Okay. So I'm just totally screwing this up today. Usually my technology works fine, but apparently today is not that day.
Okay.
I'm going to try to simplify.
Now we're seeing your PowerPoint.
Okay, I'm just going to try to simplify.
There we go. All right.
I was just going to start out with the idea of saying happy birthday to the League of Women Voters, but it's, because we're having a centennial celebration. Leola already said that. what we do as the League, we've been around for a long time, empowering voters and defending democracy. And part of that is the voter information. I want to tell you there are countdown days, 7 days to early voting starts and 28 days to actual election day. And then what voting is, that you get to choose among all those bond issues and policy issues that Leola talked about in terms of Harris County, in terms of actually in Fort Bend County. I did not see any on the Harris County ballot, but that seems like almost an impossible feat that there are not. In early voting hours, that's part of the voting guide. That these are some of the 24. Harris County has 24-hour voting locations, and I thought I'd share that, but it's also in voter guide in case you're interested in. And since you could do countywide voting any place, that should be a critical key kind of thing. And in terms of the voter guide, I was going to pull it up to share it, and hopefully this will work, because there are so many things on the ballot that are critical in terms of making decisions about who the candidates are, the information about the candidates. The League put in a lot of times. They have a committee and they pose questions to the candidates. The National League does so, and the State League does for some of the races. And then the local leagues subsequently follow up in terms of the local candidates in terms of doing that. And we make numerous phone calls trying to get that information. So depending on where you live in Harris County, you might be voting for Dan Crenshaw or Simia. Actually, there are 3 candidates on the ballot running for that seat. A Libertarian candidate is on the ballot. Depending on where you are, if you're in District 7, you're going to be voting for either Wesley Hunt or Lizzie Fletcher or Sean Kelly. If you're in District 8, you're going to be voting for Kevin Grady, or Elizabeth Hernandez, or Chris Dunkins. So it just depends on where you are, where you're located. So it is critical, as Leola said, to go and find that sample ballot so you can know which of these candidates that you're actually going to. Somebody just kick me out.
Benefield, the screen was gray again, unfortunately.
It was gray again. Okay, just forget it. Anyway, I'm just having all kinds of technical glitches today. There are 3 courts of criminal appeal positions that. Go ahead. Do I need to undo something?
No, there was just a question came up. Someone was intrigued about reference to a 24-hour voting location at the TMC Commons. And
okay, what they wanted to see that there are some 24-hour voting sites. They want to mention specifically what they are, because I can.
Yes, I'm sorry. That question came from me. I am interested in that. When when can we vote there? Is that only on voting day, or is that an early voting location? What is the
it's the whole time. They are going to operate 24-hour voting locations no matter what. So I will send you. It's already in the PowerPoint slide presentation I sent to Sarah. And so they're included in there. So just share it with everybody. But Harris County, it has all of this information readily available in terms of voters. They're going to have drive-through voter voting. So you're going to be able to drive through a location. They will come out to your car and bring the iPad for you to actually cast your ballot. So this is pretty state of the art. They're going to have at least 800 about 700 polling locations on voting day. Right now, next week when early voting starts, there will be 120 locations that you could actually go to and cast a ballot. And since you could go anywhere, you could actually text. They have a place that you could text in Harris County, and you can find out what the wait time is for that location that you're considering going to do. So technology has actually limited or actually created a situation where you shouldn't have to go and wait a long time in line. And with the 24-hour voting locations, if you're afraid of coming in contact with people, I think that would probably be the most ideal. Because one of the things that happen is that voters are not required to wear masks, but the county employees or the people who work the poll are required to wear masks. So you might want to take that into account in terms of making that decision. Also on the ballot, other than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for the state of Texas, you're going to have 4 places on the court that are vacant, and that the governor appointed someone, but those people are up for election now to serve a term, and so you will actually get to vote on that. And of course, you have numerous judges, civil court, criminal court, family law court, and whereas most people, that is going to take time, as I said. So one of the things that people don't realize how important certain positions are at that time. And so they do roll off, what political scientists call roll off. People allow things down the ballot to not be chosen. And so by chance, the people who decide to go all the way down the ballot, they get to choose those people. And those positions are increasingly very, very important, like who the district attorney is, because the district attorney decides who's going to bring charges in a particular situation. Even though the police might arrest you, the district attorney gets to decide whether they're going to bring charges, what the charges are, and that matters in terms of the court decision and going to court for the individual. So those are decisions. The county attorney, the Harris County clerk. In Harris County, they're undergoing a change. They're going to appoint an election administrator, very much like in Fort Bend County has. And because the registration process right now in Harris County is under one area, the assessor's office, and the Harris County clerk are the people who execute the election. So these are 2 separate functional. So after the Commissioner's Court has voted to select an election administrator. So after this election process, they're going to have an election administrator who will run the process in Harris County, who will be responsible for the registration as well as to get out the vote. So it's going to be a very different process in the future. You have Justice of the Peace. There are 4 constables on the ballot for constables precinct 2, 3, 4, and 5. As I said, in terms of the House delegation, there are 9. Position 1 overlap with Fort Bend County, and that's district number 22 in terms of congressional district. Pete Olson is no longer going to seek office, so it's an open seat. So it's pretty contentious election that's going on there. So you will want to pay attention to that. You've got 3 state Senate districts that are up for election coming out of Harris County. It is amazing because Harris County is such a large county. There are 8 Texas State Senate seats that are available in Harris County and Harris County alone, but all of them do not come up for election at the same time. It's an odd time period and when redistricting can take place, but that's a whole different issue. The State Board of Education has 2 seats that's up, so you would want to know, and most of the time people don't pay attention to that, but the individuals who serve in those positions have a tremendous amount of power when it comes to textbook selection and a whole series of things in terms of curriculum that takes place in the local school district. It is not the board, like for the Pearland Independent School District or the City of Houston, HISD. The State Board of Education has a tremendous amount of power in that sense. So it makes a lot of sense to pay more close attention. And we try to ask questions in terms of developing the voter guide that would elicit information so people will be able to make informed decisions in terms of that. So the Harris County Clerk's Office, the Harris County Sheriff, the County Tax Assessor and Collector's position is available, the County Department of Education. Most people think of the ISD, so they don't realize that Harris County has a Department of Education too. The county commissioners, at least precinct 3, there's a county commissioner, justices of the peace, constable 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you have an array of different people. And when you look at the Texas House seats, there are at least 19 Texas House, because every 2 years, all of the members that are coming out of Harris County, all of the members of the Texas House of Representatives are up for election. All of the members are up for election. So we will have it demarcated. It doesn't say who specifically is the incumbent, but it has the party denotes elicited by the individual's name, so you will know which political party that person belongs to. You will know whether or not they responded to the questions that we ask or whether they responded at all. Oftentimes, some candidates opt not to. And as Leola said, there have been numerous phone calls, emails, and a whole series of things that used a lot of time trying to elicit a response. And just recently, the president of our league got a friend of hers, somebody on Facebook reached out to her and was very upset that the voter guide did not have the president information in it and felt like we were deliberately doing something to prevent the president from being in the voter guide. And so she responded. We told her, no, the person, apparently that campaign did not respond. And even after numerous attempts. And so we will not voluntarily collect information and data and put it in for any candidate. And as Leola said, we do not edit what they say, unless, of course, we do give them a chance to correct if they use language that's inappropriate, because one person did, and we went back to him and say, would you like to change this? Because we're not going to print that. And they, in turn, changed the language, because some things you have to maintain an integrity standard when you're publishing the voter guide. And the league has a reputation in terms of information and we are nonpartisan. We don't support, endorse, or oppose any candidate. We provide the information that they give us. And we actually hire professional translators for the voter guide. Since we're publishing in Vietnamese, English, Spanish, and Chinese, we hire professional translators to translate it who have liability insurance. So if we are sued because something is not just quite right when you make a translation, sometimes glitches do happen, then we can be covered for that. So we are making every effort to make sure we provide the max amount of information to individuals, to the public, so they're able to make informed decisions about who the candidates they prefer, who would they want to vote for. And when we ask them questions, we are trying to take into account current things that are happening at the time, sometimes, but long-standing issues. Sometimes we ask Harris County officials, especially when it's dealing with drainage and we've had a flood, we're definitely going to ask something about flood control as an issue, and how do you plan to handle that? But we ask a series of questions in law enforcement in terms of police reform. We ask questions about that because of what's happening right now. And has happened over time. So we are always trying to seek the best possible information to get it out to the voters so they can make informed decisions in this process. So please create that plan that we talked about, spend some time looking at the voter's guide online, or pick up a copy at a library, because they are actually available. They have been disseminated to the libraries. If I'm not mistaken, we actually printed 15,000 copies. We didn't print as many copies as we have previously because of COVID. So many locations were closed, the community centers and institutions, but we made them available to libraries and in Harris County and in Houston Public Library. So you can request one and do the curbside pickup, but actually accessing it online is one way to do it. And then if you have a hard copy, you can always take that copy with you. That's what I plan to do with my hard copy. I'm going to take it in with me because it's just too many things on the ballot. I just can't figure out all of the things that I need to. I can't hold it all in my head, but I might print it out. That might be the easiest thing to do because I do have a printer. But for people who are disadvantaged and may not have a printer, and it may be lots of pages, so you might want to take that into account in terms of printing, because it could be an expensive proposition in terms of your ink cartridge, because I've used lots of them since I've been working from home. I've had to replenish them continuously. So my husband has not been exactly happy about that. And our school took the position, since you're not having to drive into work, then we figure you could bear that expense without asking for reimbursement. So I think I've covered all of the array of different races. I didn't talk about specific candidates because there are just too many candidates to talk about. And as a voter, I think it's very important to be an informed person, to seek out information so you can make the best possible choice in the election process. So unfortunately, it's going to take an investment. And I frequently tell my students that you can't really make a withdrawal without having made a deposit. So you're going to have to deposit. That means you're going to have to spend some time going over the information about the candidates before you can make the decision you need to make in terms of selecting one. Okay. That's it. Any questions? I guess we're at that point.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and this can be questions for Fort Bend, Harris County, or just general questions.
Okay.
Benefield, besides Fort Bend County, do you know of any other surrounding counties that have League of Women Voter chapters where people might be able to find voter guides for their local races?
Well, Montgomery County, the state puts out at Vote 411 a guide that's all the statewide information. The Bay Area is also chapter is also involved in the process. One of the things that Jackie Alfred, who's the chair of the Voters Guide Committee, she tends to invite everybody from the surrounding chapters of the League of Women Voters to come together in terms of the formulation of the questions and information. Missouri County the league is so new. Actually, I reached out to them with regard to something else because we were trying to do National Voter Registration Day and partner with them. And I had to send something to the national website, and I never got a response because apparently the national website is still directing their traffic for their particular chapter. They haven't set up an individual website. So I doubt that they would probably have a voter's guide. One of the things that the Houston Chronicle did do, it has a voter's guide. It doesn't have as much information about the candidates. They didn't ask them specific questions, but under each of the links, they actually have articles about the candidate, information. If they come up in a news story that people you'd have to decipher and pick through the information to try to get to the heart of what it is that you want. And for someone who's relatively new, who's on the political scene, most candidates actually have a web page that you could go to see what they're saying about themselves. I don't think you can trust the idea of the ad their opponent run against them as the basis for figuring out, is this the best candidate to vote for based on the ads? Probably some information. Now, since Google has become a verb, just Google the person and you might be able to find out all kinds of interesting stuff that you may not want to know. It might be TMI, too much information, but that is a starting point. And it depends on how much time you have. Democracy requires work. And if we're going to keep it, as Benjamin Franklin told them, we've created a republic, ma'am, if we can keep it. So we have to be conscious of that. We have to invest something in it to make sure that we keep it.
I had just posted as a chat comment a question about which of these resources results in text messages enabling one to find the closest voting location at any given time. I found that really handy.
I think it's through Harris County. Harris County has that information.
Okay, that might be Harris Votes then.
Yeah, go through Harris Vote and they might have a little, last time it was Vote Your Way, their campaign, and they've been advertising on television. I don't know whether you've seen the ads, but they've been I know the League of Women Voters Texas, they have that you can text and get reminders so you can make sure you cast your ballot during the election too. So there are lots of, it's kind of amazing when I think about it, and this is personal, probably more than that my mom is like 103 years old, and my dad, when he died back in 2004, which is 16 years ago, he was 90 years old, that think about the things they had to go through in order to try to register, drive down to the county courthouse, which was 25 miles away, and then they may not be able to register. And it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act that they actually got an opportunity to cast a ballot. In 1968 presidential election was the first time that my mom and my dad voted, and they were over 50 years old. And to me, that's tremendous. And that creates the incentive for me to remind people, don't take this for granted. This is important. The people who represent you make decisions about lots of things, and local elections are even more important than national elections if you're going to look at equivalency, because the local policymakers make decisions that affect your life on a day-to-day basis. And we tend to skirt over that and not turn out as often for those elections as we do for the national. And so if there's roll-off down the ballot, it tends to be those candidates at the bottom. And since the simplified process of straight ticket voting is no longer available, then that's going to make it more difficult. For people, you're going to have to spend some time. So get your plan together. And as people say, get your lawn chair or get some water, take a snack to be prepared. But I think if you, with 17 days available to do early voting, I think you have enough time that you shouldn't have to wait in a long line, unless you're one of those people who only going to vote on election day. Then I don't think you're going to have a long line to wait in. I wouldn't go the first day. I wouldn't probably go the second day. I'd probably go at a midpoint time period and pick a strategic time, not the first thing in the morning, but maybe 10 o'clock, and not go at lunch. So strategic planning is important in terms of casting a ballot.
Dr. Benefield, there was a question in the chat bar about how to research the down the ballot races. And I'm going to post a resource I use because I feel free as a private individual to share. Mine is aligned with my value system, and as should be all of ours, and I'll be transparent about that. From the League of Women Voters perspective, I just wonder if you could speak a little bit more about the positions that are not well covered, even in the Chronicle.
Well, actually, the Chronicle did not cover it. They just put the candidates and said whether they were incumbent or they were seeking election. I would think that probably going to that individual candidate's webpage and looking at what they're saying matters. And there are some rating services out there, but I don't generally, because they tend to be inconsistent with the idea of being nonpartisan. So I would not, you could go to I side with and find out which candidate you align in terms of your values. It's called I side with, and it'll have candidates and it'll have issues, and you can figure out which candidate that you're aligned with in terms of your political values. But as I said, the League doesn't oppose or support any candidate. We just provide that information. And we realize that it's not totally all comprehensive in terms of the questions we've asked and got a response from. So it's going to require some work on your part. I read everything. I read the newspaper. I read news magazines. I read the if it's a congressional person, I'll check their congressional record in terms of their voting behavior to make sure on the issues that they voted, how I felt about those particular issues. As I said, democracy is a very expensive proposition. It requires lots of time. And if you don't have that time, you might ask family and friends, but they may not know that much about it to tell you. And besides, more and more people, as Bob Stein did this presentation over at Rice the other night, he said that people have become so hyper-partisan, very political. They see things only through those screens and those lenses, and they don't want to integrate any other information that does not fit with what they already believe to be true. And that's so unfortunate, because we can all learn so much in this process in terms of information. If healthcare is your number one issue, I suggest you do research on healthcare. if trade policy or employment policy or whatever that issue is that's most important to you, do some research and see if the candidate that you think you might vote for is supporting that issue, or how that candidate has, or what the candidate said about the issue.
Ms. Benefield, what is your opinion of the Ballotpedia website? You familiar with that one?
Yes, it's a variation on Wikipedia. I sometimes go there to look for propositions in other states to see what propositions are on the ballot, if states have propositions on the ballot. But I always try to make sure I go to the state parties or the state website to find reaffirmation, because if Ballotpedia is similar to Wiki, anybody can upload information and it may not be the most accurate information. So you have to be a little bit cautious and careful, because like with Wikipedia, anybody can edit it and upload stuff. And so it might be the prevailing sentiment at the time. This is the example and illustration I use. Right before the 2008 election, and John McCain announced that Sarah Palin was going to be his running mate, there was nothing out on Wikipedia but about 2 lines about Sarah Palin, the governor of Alaska. And somebody the night before, knowing it, did a data dump, went out there and put lots of information about her. And all of a sudden, people were like, oh, she's got a great profile. Not arguing that she didn't, but all of a sudden somebody decided that they wanted to upload, and they could just upload whatever information. And there was no censorship police, in the sense that saying, maybe this is not correct. People will challenge. They have a process for challenging, but I'm not as trusting. I will go to government websites and look for information as the source. And I would tell my students to go to government or education. There are foundations that actually do voting and election. There's one organization that I use it in classes, Pro-Con. They put a lot of information out about issues. And the Brennan Center for Justice, they put out a lot of information about elections and about issues. And so I will use that, as I consider them reputable sources in my classroom to use, that you can verify.
You said Pro-Con, what was the other one?
It's called Pro-Con.
And what was the other one that you mentioned?
The Brennan Center. Brennan Center. They actually do a lot of things on votings and elections. The Brennan Center does a lot in terms of election politics.
And I posted the ballot link again, because I just can't tell y'all, as we heard from both counties, there's so many items. So make sure you personalize your ballot, encourage your friends and loved ones to do so. Schedule your vote day in your calendar. Make it an outing, since we're not going out as much. If you're choosing to vote in person and voting early, especially with Harris County. I know Leona shared links with Fort Bend, Harris County. I love that website that I shared, and you can see how busy that that poll is or not. We're also going to share the link to this recording and the slides online, as with the other webinar videos. And if you all have any questions before we close, please feel free to enter it in the chat, or Sherry, I don't know if people are able to unmute themselves.
I want to say that if this is your first time voting, you might want to go to the Harris County website, and they have a video that walks you through how the polling machine works, because that will help you understand it as a step-by-step process and how the polling machine works. And that do not be afraid to ask for assistance. If you get there and you think you're not doing something right, then they have employees there who can help you before you make a catastrophic mistake. So ask for assistance when you don't be afraid to ask for assistance. I tell my students frequently, no question is a dumb question, because they'll say, I think it might, no, ask for help before you create a colossal mistake in terms of voting that you didn't want to, and that you cast a ballot before you've actually selected everybody that you want to. So go out on Harris County's website. They have a step-by-step process in terms of how to cast your ballot. I think if there's a problem in going to a polling location on the day, if there's a problem, you could correct for it. Whereas if you do a mail ballot, you might not be able to take corrective action for fixing a problem. Although I think voting by mail is absolutely incredible. People have done it in the state of Oregon, they've done it they've been doing it since the 1990s without fanfare. They have one of the highest turnout rates for voters, 70+%. So that's a good sign, and it works. But if you do feel that you have health challenges or whatever, and you don't feel comfortable with the idea, then make sure you do the verification process. If you do a mail ballot, make sure you read it closely and careful and follow all the instructions associated with it. Because, as I said, there's no do-over. And so make sure you try to do it. And have somebody to look at it. Have a family or friend after you've filled it out. You know, it can't be that private that you don't want anybody to know on the planet who you're voting for. So look at this and see if it's right. Did I sign it in the right place, or did I do this? Make sure you date and sign it. Do all the things that you need to do to make sure that you're following the steps that have been. And they actually have a video out online at Harris County that tells you how to make sure you fill out your mail ballot. And the tracking system, I think that's that part, but it doesn't tell you when the vote is counted, but you can track your mail ballot application to see when they get it and receive it, because they will track it and let you know that they've gotten it. So if you're concerned that you're asking for a mail by ballot, and because oftentimes you request the ballot, you got it, and then you go to a polling location, it's going to show that you got a ballot in the mail. And if you do it in early voting, you have to take that ballot. If you change your mind after you get a ballot by mail, if you change your mind that you're not going to vote that way, that you're going to go in person, make sure you take that ballot with you to turn it in, because otherwise you're not going to be able to cast a ballot.
We have a really important question on the signature. Faith wants to know what signature Harris County uses to compare the signature on the mail-in ballot to. It correct me if I'm wrong, Faith, if that's what you're.
They either use the application, the application when you submitted an application asking for one, or what they have on file from you when you registered to vote. One of the two.
In Fort County, they will first look at the signature on the application form, and if there's not a clear match, then they look at your signature on your voter registration application form or your voter registration card. They will go back and compare signatures as many as 6 years back before they throw something out. So they do a lot of comparing. Yeah.
Well, Fort Bend is thorough. That is wonderful to know. Yeah. But, you know, sometimes you sign something, you're trying to be fanciful. And then the next time you sign something, you're trying to be regular and ordinary. And you could be messing with something that's so critical. I didn't realize that, because I don't remember when I signed mine, what it looks like. I don't remember how I signed it. So if there was a comparison, I'm not sure it would look the same or be similar or quite similar, but I love knowing that Fort Bend County is extra thorough in that process. That matters. All that matters.
If I might throw in a personal note, I had a ballot thrown out once because they said that my signature across that seal of the envelope didn't match what was on my registration application or my application for the vote by mail ballot. I would recommend taking a picture of your signature when you apply for the mail-in ballot so that you can make sure when you're signing across that seal of the envelope, when you're filling your ballot in, and you're being extra careful because who's used to signing something over the seal of an envelope? Take a picture of that signature so you can make sure it matches. That would be my advice.
Great idea. Yes. And also everyone should know that it is now required, as a result of the lawsuit that the League of Women Voters was a part of, it is now required that you are notified if there's any doubt about your ballot, your mail ballot. You're notified in time to make a correction so that your ballot can be counted. So you have rights.
Thanks for sharing that.
That is amazing that so many things have come about because of organizations taking a stand and pursuing it to ensure that that we're defending democracy at the grassroots level and making sure it happens. Because I'm trying to figure out how to get my mom an application to vote by mail for the election in Alabama. And then I just saw something that said the Supreme Court reinstituted if they had to have a signature or witness verification process in some states in order to get an absentee ballot in terms of voting by absentee ballot, that you had to get somebody to verify it and witnesses, that the Supreme Court has said that's completely valid and you should be able to make that happen.
Sorry, Dr. Benefield, to interrupt you. Sherry, who's the host of the WebEx, has to leave as well.
Okay.
I cannot thank you and Leola so much for y'all's time and help today. Thanks for your guidance. Even though I've seen these events and meetings before, I always learn more. No one can know all this stuff. It's very complex. So we really appreciate y'all's time, especially since this election is so different with COVID. So thank y'all for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good day. Thank y'all so much for attending.
All right.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day. I'll turn off the recording and this will be available within a few days.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, Leola.